Hello everybody, it's Graham here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to Living Through Cancer. This is episode 7. So, where were we last time? We were talking about the biopsy and getting prepared for it and going through that emotional state of thinking, we're now into that next stage, and I already knew the results of the first scan were going to be told to me after the biopsy. So there was a meeting scheduled with the senior physician to talk about exactly where the cancer was and what it was doing, and they were obviously then going to tell me at whether it's T2, T3 or T4. But before I start and before I go in, I want to give a big shout out to Movember. It's Movember. That's all about men's well-being, mental health, and obviously prostate and suicide in men. So a big shout out. I did do a bit of an appeal out there on the community of LinkedIn, which I've been a member of for many, many years. I've got a lot of close friends and associates who are obviously members of the LinkedIn. It's a professional platform. And I also want to say thank you so much for the very, very wonderful comments that came back. It meant an awful lot for me, and it also endorsed me to carry on and tell the story that I'm going through. Bear in mind, it's just my story. It's just my feelings, my mental health, and what I consider to be a huge change in my life. Not just my life, but my family's life. What I'm doing on a day-to-day basis and how I structure myself going forward. Anyway, a big thank you to everybody. And it's very, very much appreciated. Right, the day of the biopsy. I do recall getting up quite early on that day. Same routine, breakfast, getting Morgan off to school, and then it's just me and my wife and my thoughts and our thoughts, talking about our current state we're in. Still dealing with that raw emotion of the uncertainty of what's next, the steps that we were going to. Already processing the first scan, or what information I had from the first scan. Everything was still very much, what if, what do we do if it's that, where do we go from there? But let's be very clear. One thing you have to do is always stay positive. Have that positive mindset that you're going to go through it and you're going to get there. And then once you establish all the information, and then you can make very defining steps to move forward in your life. I'm not saying that's what I did. There was little bouts of panic and things like that. So we got to the hospital and found the hospitals are huge, and found the department I had to go to, and sat in the waiting room with my wife, and there was an eerie silence about the whole thing. There was the receptionist in front of us, gave us a lovely welcome, had to fill in the forms, sat down, and at the back of my mind I always knew what the procedure was going to be. I knew what was coming up, and I tried to distract myself from it, and that was about talking. There was an elderly couple opposite us, and her husband had already gone through, and we struck up a conversation. We were talking about the effects of what it was having on everybody, and I'm talking about prostate cancer. I was talking about the coronavirus and all these other things that were going on in our lives, and that just seemed to pass the time quite quickly. And then before I know it, the this couple, her husband, dear old lady, husband walked out like he'd just got off a horse. He was in a gown, and it was a case of, he was a little bit bowed leg, and that was because of the procedure, obviously, And he came and sat down, and he said, "Well, you're next, boy." I actually remember that. So you're next, boy, and he was given a cup of coffee and or a cup of tea, I think it was, and he had a biscuit with it, and then my name was called, and that was it. And so the journey began. This was, reality had set in, and it was a case of, this is the real first. I know I had the scan before, but this was crunch time. This was going in there, and I'm not going to describe. I'm not going to go into that fact of describing the whole procedure. But what they do is they basically take samples, very small samples of the prostate, and certainly where they can see the affected area, and it's painless. It's not an enjoyable thing because you are very exposed, you're very vulnerable, and you're in the hands of people who understand their job very, very well and do it very, very well. But it's the more the fear factor. That's all it is. It's the fear factor of lying on a table, in a position where people are working at behind the scenes, so to speak, and the information that comes out of that is going to determine how you move forward. So that carried on for about 20 minutes. They took the samples. All the area down there was numbed, so it was very painless. And I had a person next to me holding my hand and asking me, questions about my life, which again distracted me from what was going on at the back. And it was over before I knew it. So all that, reservations and the unknown of having this, it was over before it started. But it was another thing I can tick off then. You see, it was there was going to be another release information from that. What happened after I'd done that, and they stitched me up a little stitch, and they pad you up, and you wear these fancy knickers to hold everything together, and then you go off, get changed. I didn't get changed, actually. Sat down and had a cup of tea and a biscuit, and with the knowledge that I was going to get called back within about 10 minutes after I've settled everything down, and they were going to talk to me and show me exactly in high definition the previous results of the scan before. Now, I didn't know that was going to happen. I knew they were going to tell me something, but I didn't know I was going to see in high definition exactly the affected areas, and also what was going to be the next steps after that. That was quite jarring, and that was a realization that you have landed, and this is the start of it. Sat me down, went in, and she was an absolutely wonderful person. I don't know why people get upset about the NHS, but they were fantastic at what they did. I'm going to tell you the conversation, because I don't want to drag on. I'm going to tell you the conversation in the next episode, because I need to talk about it in detail. So I'm going to pause here. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying it. And if there is anyone out there who's really, this is helping them, keep on tuning in, because there's a whole load of issues up there and in my body that can help people who are starting their journey halfway through, or they know somebody who's having this journey. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and see you next time. Graham here. Big thank you to everybody who's been joining me on this journey, and I want to mention Macmillan Trust, the ones who have been caring for me and taking me through this journey, and still do care for me and still have those regular conversations, whether I need it or not. They're there. I have access to them all the time. Thank you, Macmillan. You are fantastic. So let's go back to episode 6 and what I was talking about, and also episode 7. This was all about the biopsy and how I was dealing with it. The last episode we talked about, it was done, it was out there, and the information was now ready to be told to me in a way that I could probably deal with it. Now you don't prepare yourself because you don't know what you're going to be told. But I walked into that office, and bear in mind my wife was in the waiting room, so I thought it was just a quick informal chat, and that would be it. Biopsy over. Little informal chat, go home, and we'll contact you for the next thing. But no, this was come in, sit down, I'm going to show you the results of your first scan in high definition. You're going to see it all in its raw form. You're going to see what had happened to your prostate, the affected area, how it would actually managed to work itself out of the prostate and work around into areas that they were very concerned about. And it was at the point where that became very, very real, that this anomaly has grown inside of me for I don't know how many numbers of years. It takes quite a bit of time to go from T1 to T4, but the reality had dropped. So this wonderful person sat me down and said, look, here's the results of your first scan, and beautiful high definition picture. There's the prostate, there's your bone structure around it, and you could clearly see it was like the dark side of the moon. The prostate's like a little chestnut. And there was probably a good 70% which was affected. But you could also see it had actually burst out, and there was a cloud surrounding areas of other organs, and very, 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 very close to the bone. And this is what really concerned them. I was told we were at stage 3, they call it T3, not T4. T4 is terminal, so T3 stroke T3.5, I guess, because of the closeness to the bone. And once it goes into the bone or actually infects into other organs, you're talking a different story then. But this was this was a little bit of concern for them, and they were, talking quite quickly to tell me, don't worry, there are now things we understand which we can then now move, and that became the fast track process for me and them. The relationship between me and them was now on a very straight fast track course, a course of treatment, a course of action, and I was reassured at every point that you're going to be okay, and we'll deal with this, and we'll know more information once we do the MRI. And the MRI would then clearly tell me exactly, if it had already affected the bone, because what I was looking at that time was a high definition, but it didn't clearly show. It would look like it was right on the bone, but they couldn't tell if it was actually infected into the bone. And this is what they were going to do next, determine whether, the T3.5 or T4 was the next course of action. So based on that information, my wife joined us, and we had that next conversation of, a little bit about the treatment process. And this is where I started to feel, okay, I'm confident that I'm now being, or the what was inside me was now being, there was a counterattack. There was a course of action that was going to now start fighting what was fighting me in my body. And what was told very quickly is that we now have to, suppress your testosterone, and they are testosterone blockers they give you. And it was given to me there and then. It was, right, this is what we're going to do. Immediately we have to start fighting back with this cancer and suppress it and stop it continuing to grow. Once you stop it and reduce it, and then the next stage would obviously to kill it off, or that's wrong to say kill it off. It's they put it into a dormant state. That's what they do, and it becomes dormant to a degree where it has no capability of growing. So bear in mind, the physical side of me was now being dealt with. There will be a war raged inside of me, but then always remember, what happens in there is not particularly what happens in your head. And we'll go on and talk about that, because the information I've gleaned from this unlocks another process in your head that is somewhat comforting, because the fight had begun, and you're building your mental strength back up to say, yeah, okay, I'm ready now to understand this whole process and how I'm going to fight it mentally. But bear in mind, there was one clear doubt yet to understand whether it had gone into the bone and it had actually affected other organs, because they didn't have that information yet. All they knew clearly was that the state of the prostate, and what happened to the prostate. Now, one of the questions I had was, well, is there any other way to fight this battle with the cancer? And that information was made available to me as well. Well, we can cut it all out. We can take it all out, or we can suppress it and put it into a dormant state. And after careful consideration, it was, and this was probably a discussion we had later on, is they didn't feel if they operated that they would be able to get all the cancer out. And because of my age, they believed if I went through the course of the blockers, testosterone blockers, suppressing the cancer, it decreasing and then going through the radiotherapy, that would be a much more successful outcome for me because of my age, and I had the ability to deal with it better. So I hope that bit of information has been helpful for you. On the next one, I'm going to talk about how we had a conversation downstairs on the same day, which was really quite shocking. You know, what, you're going to get more information? No, it was how they felt we should be reacting. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'm so happy to be telling this story, and a big shout out to Macmillan Trust. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Hello guys, welcome back. It's Graham here, episode 9, living through cancer as a stay-at-home dad. I've just gone through the last episode, or the last couple of episodes, and just recapped on what I've been talking about. And there's so many things that have, become quite vivid in my mind of that time last year. And that time last year was madness in so many effects, it had. And I'm going to talk about the mental state quickly, because the doubts that I had was not just about my physical health, it was about my mental health, and giving up everything that I'd worked for. And I'm talking on a professional stance, my work and my community within that workplace had suddenly gone AWOL. And that was because I didn't have the strength, or I didn't have the ability to, or the confidence to tune back into that, or even get back in. And once you come out, and you go through a process of, realization of cancer and all these things, you default back to wanting to be the person you were before you actually even had it. I remember I told you the story about when we moved country, we came back here and re-established our lives and started up a whole new, life cycle. Had Morgan, and went through the whole process of raising Morgan to an age where he was, a little bit more independent. The work had been put on the back burners for a few years, purely because I did not have the strength or the enthusiasm or the get up and drive to even pursue it. We were lucky, we were in a position where my wife went back to work and I experienced the whole stay-at-home dad, which was a fantastic experience and learning curve for me. I thoroughly enjoy what I do with my life, my current life. Put the cancer to one side, my life is fantastic, because I contribute to Morgan on a day-to-day basis, where I've never had that opportunity with Jacob. I was working away a lot. So although that was happening, and I was enjoying it, and I had the cancer become part of my life on a day-to-day basis. There was a fine balance, absolute fine balance with regards to the mental health. Your physical health, you know, you can see, you know, what the testosterone blockers were doing to me, you know, and this is a conversation I'm going to go on to in a minute, but I don't want to go into too much of that, but it was becoming very apparent I was changing. My physical state was changing. The energy levels were dropping. The enthusiasm was dropping again. But we managed to combat that to a point where me and the wife, we made a bit of a pact a few months back and said, you know, this is the structure of our family. We will always maintain that structure. We will have to always ensure that our children come first. They are happy, they are content, and they have stability in the household, because we respond in all different ways. You know, if one drops down, the other one picks that person up. That's how me and my wife have always operated. If one's down, I'll pick her up and bring her up. If I'm down, she'll bring me up. But if the two drop down, that's where it affects the children, and you can't do that. You know, you have to hide it. You have to, you know, compensate for anything that makes you feel like, I don't want to get up today. I'm just going to lounge around. I'm going to sit in my softies and, you know, dwell on what I have as a disease. And that's not me. Never has been, and that's not my wife. So we made it very clear to each other that, you know, we have Morgan on a day-to-day basis. We have to still educate him. We still have to teach him the ways of the world. We have to feed him. We have to clothe him. We have to do everything that an active, vibrant family should be doing. Never mind me being, you know, stamped with cancer, you know. But that's how we operate. You know, my wife, she goes through her ups and downs, and I bring her up and make sure that she's still, you know, the person she's always been to me, you know, and vice versa. So let's get on to that next conversation after I'd sat and gone through these beautiful high definition pictures of my prostate and what was happening to it. So after the conversation, my wife and I, we sat there and, you know, wow, that's interesting. That's, you know, had a few questions, and it went backwards and forwards, and this is what we're going to do. And the doctor frantically asked for these testosterone blockers to be brought up, and told me about the medication and what they do and the side effects, so on and so forth. And then she said, which struck a chord, we will put you in the Macmillan process. Now I didn't know what Macmillan was. I know obviously it was a cancer organisation, and a very, you know, well deserved as in what they do. But me going into the Macmillan process, and yep, you'll be looked after through that process. And she said to me, don't worry, you're not going to die, you know, because everyone thinks once you go into that Macmillan process, it's end of life. You know, you're going through your end of life process. She said, don't worry, it's not end of life, you know. I thought, well, that's good, because I do recall saying to her, you know, well, how long have I got, Doc? How long do I have? You know, because I wanted those answers, you know, that helps me process things. And I'm sure that happens to a lot of people. They want to know, and they want to be reassured that you haven't come to the end of life yet. Don't worry, So that struck a chord. We'll put you in the hands of Macmillan, and they're going to process you through their system as well. The next stage was to go downstairs and have this conversation. Oh no, we stayed in that office, and she said, I'm going to bring you, she's going to introduce me to one of the Macmillan cancer specialists, they're called. And they deal with they take on your case, and they deal with any questions, they guide you through all the processes which are going to go up and coming for me. And it was a jarring conversation. This guy knew what he was talking about and introduced himself, sat down, and it's like he put a box of tissues on the table. And I thought, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Because once you take in that information of what has been told you, it suddenly dawns on you, yeah, you've got cancer, you've got this, you've got that. And we're not sure if it's 4 yet. It could be. All that started to trickle down. My wife had now realised that, yeah, it's there, it's landed. Yeah. And they're obviously prepared for people's different reactions. And both myself and my wife, we didn't have a reaction, because we'd already started dealing with all this, weeks before. We'd actually planned for the worst and hoped for the best. So the latter was shining through on us. It was a bizarre conversation, and he kept on touching very raw, parts of this process. Well, the blockers, you realise you're not going to have, your sex life is going to go. Can you deal with that? Can you cope with that? He was saying. He was telling us stuff, or he's giving us information that was, in some ways, bringing it right home to us and putting it in our face, and waiting for that reaction, waiting for this to, pour out of us, but nothing. We were prepared and we understood, and credit to me and my wife, we stood fast. We were not going to show an outpouring of emotion. If we ever do that, we'll do that at home in our, in the privacy of our home. But anyway, guys, anyone who's watching this, a big thank you for sharing. And if you like it, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. It's a story I enjoy telling, and I hope you're getting something from it. I'll see you next time, and bye for now. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Graham here. So, another episode. Let's talk about, or let's recap what I was doing in the last episode. It was very much about having the biopsy, having the discussion with the cancer specialist, being introduced to my new go-to person, which is Macmillan Support. Wonderful guys. I had two appointed go-to people who I could discuss any issues, any queries, any information I needed about what I was going through or about the prostate cancer itself. So, again, I keep on saying a big shout out to them, but they are superb at what they do, and it's very much appreciated. So listen, I was talking about the blockers, the testosterone blockers. To me, and it still is, a very intrusive treatment process. It suppresses your testosterone, and it has a whole heap of side effects, which they do tell you about, and there are support groups that you can go to. But myself, it was something I had to deal with, and it came on, or certain parts of the blockers, the side effects came on quite quickly for me. And bear in mind, I was on the tablets, which is a reduced dosage. Whole purpose was to stop the growth of the cancer. It was all about reducing the size, putting it into a bit of a dormant state, so then I could have, at a later stage, the radiotherapy. But the conversation when I sat down with the support team, or one of the support team, it was very much about what was going to happen to me once I was starting to take these testosterone blockers. And he talked about the body will change. I will become, obviously quite chubby around the stomach area. I would start to grow breasts. I would have a lot of swelling in my legs, and so on and so forth. The whole thing is, and I'm somewhat avoiding one of the main side effects, and I don't want to be graphic or say it in a way that it, scares men. But one of the things, you do lose your sex drive, and obviously that affects your sex life, and there's certain other complications around that area that if you don't use that muscle, it just shrinks and becomes redundant to a point. All these things happen to you. It shouldn't scare you. It's part and parcel of you going through that treatment plan. That's an awful lot to absorb and to take in. And with my wife being there, and she supported me 100%, as all wives do. It was a case of us having to now go home with that information, starting the treatment, knowing that I've got to have an MRI because they were still very worried that the cancer had gone out of the prostate, burst out of the prostate, gone through into other areas and has attached itself to the bone, but they weren't sure if it had actually penetrated the bone. So there was a whole host of things we had to go home and start to digest and come to terms with. It was official. I had, at that stage 3 cancer, or stage 3.5. So, after digesting what the cancer support team, the Macmillan support team, had told me, how did I feel? I think my mental health was in between. It was wanting to lean one way and it wanted to pull me back to, it's okay, we know what's happening and we're going to get through it. Excuse me. I think one of the main problems I had, and what my wife had, was if the results of the MRI, which I hadn't had yet, was to the point where it was in the bone, yes, there was still a course of treatment, but your life expectation had greatly reduced. But we couldn't. I tried, very, very hard, and said to my wife, to distract herself from that. From that point of going, it's in the bone, and now we have to plan a different route. It was stay positive. It's going to be okay. It's not in the bone, and we're going to move forward as we planned. Now, that's all well and good. You can say those things, but hey, in reality, you secretly start to think the worst. The great old saying is, you plan for the worst, hope for the best. When a scenario like that does come to the front, of course you're going to think the worst. But I had Morgan to think about, I had my wife to think about, I had Jacob to think about, and we had to keep on going through our routine day after day after day until we had the real hardcore information. And then we can move those steps and, decide what course of action. So put that to the side, put the MRI scan and is it in the bone or not? We had the reality of the information we was given to us, and that was about the testosterone blockers. And me coping mentally, mental health, again, it keeps on creeping back into, I'm going to change, I'm not the person I used to be, and I'm going to, become just a shell of what I was before. And that's the honest truth. Now let's tell you a few facts. Based on, the statistics of what is given and what is now on TV, and it's all around there, and still men feel quite ashamed of being labelled with prostate cancer. The Prostate Cancer UK, in 2017 and 2019, 33 men die of prostate cancer each day. 12,000 just in England. 12,000 men are diagnosed with prostate cancer. That's a staggering figure. I think it's one of the leading deaths behind lung cancer in America. Why aren't men able to talk about these things? Because it is such a taboo subject. Because what it robs you of your identity, your masculinity. That's what it takes away from you. It's great that we have a diagnosis, a treatment plan, and a prognosis, which ultimately, you get through out on the other side, as long as you catch it early. And that's what I urge guys: go out there, get your PSA done. It's so simple. Anyway, I'm going to stop there, and I'll see you on the other side. Thank you for joining me. It's a great help to me, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Graham here. Here we go, and let's start with me being back at home now on the treatment of the blockers, the testosterone blockers. Now you might say, well, you talked a little bit about it on the last one, but I didn't actually tell you a few more of the side effects and what they did. And when any man who's going through this will say, Graham, what about those hot flushes? And what about the swelling and the fatigue? And what about, the weight gain and the growing breasts? Yes, it happens. And it happens to me, and it's happening to me still. Now bear in mind that, I've moved on to quarterly injections, so I get a massive hit at the beginning when I have the injection, and wow, the hot flushes. And I know you can have a pill to treat that, but it's still, you have to breathe through them, these hot flushes, and the fatigue hits you very suddenly. I'll give you an example. I could be watching a movie at night, 7:30, suddenly bang, it hits me, the fatigue, and you just literally fall over. You can't watch that movie anymore. And I do that on a regular basis, sit with the family watching something interesting, and suddenly the fatigue hits and I have to go to bed. I just can't carry on. Or I'm sitting there with the family having watching something interesting, hot flush just literally rises, and I have to go and breathe through it or go outside and just try and cool off, and that can happen 4 or 5 times a day. The swelling in your legs. Now you have to be aware with these blockers, these testosterone blockers, they will take you to the point where the fatigue becomes really part of your day. The hot flushes do, the weight gain, all these things chip a little bit more off you. I know they're doing good, they're raging the battle. The battle is being won inside, it's suppressing the cancer or the prostate, and it's bringing it down to a size where they can then carry out the radiotherapy. And I know this, and everybody does who goes through this treatment plan, and we know the end result is going to be a positive one, but you have to deal with these side effects. And it's very, very intrusive, and it's a personal journey for yourself, because you don't want to show weakness out there. You don't want to show your family that you're going through these little episodes in your day, and it's bit by bit changing you. If your family sees you as a very active person before the whole diagnosis, you were maybe a runner, you were maybe a walker, you were one of these things that made you very active, and then suddenly you're reduced to experiencing these episodes and the fatigue. Now they will say to you, and I rang up my cancer specialist and I said, look, these blockers, it's doing this to me, it's doing that to me. And they said, look, start walking, do this, start weightlifting. And yes, it can be done, but in your daily life or your daily routine, where do you fit in all this? Where do you fit it all in? It's one of those things that you have to commit to and say, I'm going to do absolutely everything that I can to maintain the stability in my train of thought, because that's another thing. Your mental health, that takes a bashing as well. And there's many times where before I actually had that third and final diagnosis, that I said to my wife, look, if anything happens to me, this is what I want you to do. And that used to upset her a lot. But all I was trying to do was plan, my exit, and ensure that the boys and my wife was looked after. But she wouldn't have any of that. And I've said in the past, we did make a pact, and we said we would be positive and stay positive and carry on. And to a degree we did. The only time I actually really struggled was when I told my sister. And I remember the conversation, and it was very, very hard. And it was just after that we had the, you've got stage 3.5, and we're going to do an MRI because we're quite worried about it being in the bone. I made that decision. I was going to tell certain parties, and the hardest one was telling my sister. And I couldn't tell anyone else. That was the only way I could have a little bit of release without having a whole host of people, pouring pity on me. And I didn't want any of that. I told one of my sisters, and we have regular conversations, and it felt just easier. But it was a struggle to tell her. And I remember halfway through the conversation, I just had to stop, say, look, I'll phone you back, because it was still very, very raw, very raw. And, anyone who's watching this who is going through it, you might not be stage 3, you might be stage 1 or 2, you might be worse, you might be stage 4, but you have those roller coaster moments at the beginning until you manage to gather all your thoughts together and have, the diagnosis and the treatment plan all locked in, and there you go. But it was a strange one, and I look back and I remember what she told me and how she, coped with that information, because, she was down at her allotment, and I remember calling her and she said, look, I'm on my way home. I'll phone you, when I get home. And she sensed from the tone of my voice that something was up. So she coped with it very, very well and gave me such encouragement, and has all the way through. And all of my sisters have all contributed in different ways and kept me on the right path, whether it's a little text every couple of weeks, whether it was, a conversation that I've had, little bits of input from different people, keeps you up there, keeps you on the right track and the right place. And obviously, my boys and my wife, who I have, contact every single day, have kept me there and in the place that I should be. But don't be ashamed at all of having moments of complete, breakdown of your own, clarity of the situation. You do have that, and it's nothing to be ashamed of, because you're dealing with so many aspects of what prostate cancer is and what it's been, or what it's continually doing to you. But remember, the treatment plan, that is the fight back. That is the beginning of the battle inside you. And another conversation I had with the local GP, because I couldn't cope with this feeling of in my legs and this heaviness. It was like wearing lead boots. And he said to me, and another one of these conversations where something clicks inside you, he said to me, Graham, there's an absolute battle going on inside you, with the tablets you're taking. this rage is ongoing. So of course you're going to feel these things. And he was great, and he gave me something just to take the edge off things, and that helped, and that took me a little bit closer to feeling normal, because that's what you crave, just to feel normal, because the whole process of having your PSA, going to have your first scan, having your biopsy, and then being told of the diagnosis and what level of cancer you have, and then going further on to an MRI scan. That is all in a process of 5 weeks. So from being normal but feeling, well, I can't say I was normal, because I was having bouts of backache, going to the toilet 2, 3, 4 times a day, feeling fatigue. I was having that for about 1.5 years, 2 years. So I wasn't quite normal, but I was nowhere near in the place I was after the PSA result. Remember, I had a PSA of 37. That is incredibly high. But anyway, these things come to test us, and all I'm wanting to say is, guys, if you're out there listening to this, you can use me as a comparison to how you are managing it, and that helps me knowing that you're watching. And thank you so much for all the absolute wonderful messages I've had over the last 2 weeks. We only launched this channel 2 weeks ago, and the response I've had from ex-colleagues, associates, friends, family have been absolutely amazing, and thank you so much for that. It means a lot. There's a long way through this journey, and I'm not going to keep on talking about the issues of the diagnosis, because we'll move past that. But one of the things is the mental health and how you bring prostate cancer into your daily life. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this, a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.